Hi drawing students, so I'm going to show you in this demonstration how to blend color pencils. There are three tricks that were already mentioned in a previous video. Directions, changing direction is super important, layering and building up many layers, and then pressure. The pressure you apply is super important. So I'm going to use one color as my main color, and then I'm going to do three ways to alter a color here. So I'm going to make tints, shades, and tones, and in each one I'm going to blend them so that they're as even and smooth as I can get them. And the previous video you would have seen that artists emphasize like being really light. When you put your first layer of color pencil down, you want to hold your pencil a little bit further back, not close up. So holding it more like when we did our shading work, kind of farther on the end, and go quickly back and forth, but you don't want to have a lot of gaps between your lines. Now orange is a pretty light color overall, so these do appear pretty light just to start with. And it's always a good idea to start with the light color first. So the first one in this first box, I'm going to create tints. So a tint is when you add white to a color. Tint. And then this is going to be a shade. And that's when you add black to a color. And then this one is a tone. So I'm going to add the complement or opposite, or in some cases you add gray. So I'm going to start by putting the other pencils aside. So I have two different blues, white and black, with my orange. So I'm going to grab the white. And when I put the white on here, I'm going to start by just kind of moving in a little circle. Or actually, I'm going to switch and I'm going to go just in an opposite direction straight away. So you can see the color change, even though I'm not putting more pressure on this. And it does start to smooth it out. So the color becomes different right away by adding that white. And I'm going to switch directions again. And I'm slowly putting a little more pressure on it. So I'm putting 2 layers of white down. Now if I want to go back and get out all that saltiness, so like when you see the white texture within this, this is called or referred to as being salty. Not like someone, not like in social terms, but so I'm going to go over this again with orange, and I'm going to go lightly. If you can see this up here, well, there's some white scratches. Often in colored pencil work, you'll get scratches through the waxy surface. And that typically is because you start using the wood part of your pencil comes through, or there's just a rough piece in the colored pencil. So I'm letting it be a little more bold orange up here, and down here I'm going to try and make it as white or light as I can. And I'm going to try and blend or burnish a little bit more by using my pencil with a little more pressure. And if I stop right now, you can see that this section down here is slightly lighter, and this part's a little more salty. I'm going to push on this a little bit more in a different direction. I'm kind of moving in a circle and working across this diagonally to smooth it out. I don't want it to be streaky. Now even the part at the very top that I added more orange to, I can still smooth that out by going over it with white. You should be able to see it. So these are tints. Orange changed by adding white. Shade is the next one. So shade is when you add black to a color. Adding black to a color is something you should go at very, very carefully, because black is so powerful compared to any other color in the spectrum. So when I start applying this black, I am going to just put a super light layer on it. Very little pressure is being applied here, and I'm going to slightly switch direction. To go opposite what I had before. I'm going to fade this black out as I go to the bottom of this. All right, so I had one layer of orange and then I put one light layer of black over it. And now I'm gonna go over it with orange again. And when I add this orange, the lighter color is always the color that's gonna help me blend. I'm just gonna go over it once in an opposite direction. And then I'll start applying a little more pressure. If I were gonna add other colors into this, this would be probably the time I would do that. I'm gonna switch directions again and add another layer of orange to this. So you can see it's still pretty salty. You can see all the white graininess through it until I go back and apply a lot of pressure. Now, if I wanted it to appear darker orange, I could introduce another layer here, really gently, of black. I'm gonna let it stop right about there. I might try to make this end a little darker. There we go. So there's that, and now I'll burnish. So I'm applying heavier amounts of pressure. I'm starting to get that white speckly business to disappear. Well, anytime you burnish, it is a little harder to go back. I can't necessarily make any of this a lot lighter. You can sometimes erase colored pencils, though, if you get to a point where you're really unhappy with a small detail. It is possible. It doesn't erase white, but it would definitely clean up. So now I'm going to go over it with a straight line and see if I can smooth this out a little bit more, get more of that saltiness out. And then I will change directions and go over it in an opposite fashion to see if I can get even more of that saltiness out. In some professional colored pencil sets, you can get a blender, a colorless blender as well, but we don't have that in our set. So I won't continue on about it. So this is a shade. It goes from darker to light. And then the last sample that I want you to make is a tone. A tone is when you mix a color with its opposite, or sometimes gray. So I'm going to start same strategy. Blue is not as strong. I'm choosing to use the light blue because it is not as strong as the other one. And I'm adding it down here. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction again. I probably should have done that earlier on. I'm hoping this will show up with different results. So toning is what you're going to do if you want to change a color to make it a bit more dull instead of making it really dark. So it kind of neutralizes a color. Oops. Switching directions, adding another layer. And you can see that sort of cancels out that blue a little bit. I don't want it to look like just blue on top of orange. I wanted to change the orange so the orange appears different. Now I don't like how inconsistent this is. The blue kind of drops off right here. So I'm going to go back in with my blue and see if I can fade this out. If I want the tone to be stronger, I'll add more. But there's lots and lots of layering to working with colored pencils. And now I'll go in with my orange colored pencil. And I'm going to skip the circle layer on this one. And go back this way. Now another thing you can do when you're trying to blend two colors together is add white, which sometimes works. And I'll just do a little of that over here, so you can see how it has an impact. White doesn't, it's not necessarily colorless. It's going to change what you've got, but it is going to help work those colors together, and you can apply more pressure to it. So in this part over here, I'm just using some white to burnish. That did turn out a little bit streaky, which I don't love. So I'm going to try and see if I can fix that up with my blue. Patch this in little circles. I'll go over it with orange too. There. So there I burnished with white. And then over here, I will just burnish with orange. So I'm definitely applying more pressure to my pencil now. And then change my direction a few more times. Because this isn't careful work or detail work or a finished piece, I'm just gonna kind of go for it. All right, so the tone does look a little different from the shade, but there isn't too much of a variation in this case. So here are the 3 samples I want you to make. I want you to make a tint, a shade, and a tone, and you can use any color combinations you want. The opposite of orange is blue, so I went with that. If you're using red and green, they're opposite colors. You could use those as well, or you could use yellow and violet. Those are the main opposites that we have in our sets. Otherwise, other questions people typically have is like in the color wheel, if I want to make blue-green, how do I get it? Well, you have to do what we just did by putting colors together. Blue with green on top repeatedly gets you blue-green, right? So if you want a color that you don't have, you just mix it by layering the 2 colors together. And again, if you want to blend it with white, you can. Burnishing always kind of pulls those colors together, and white does a nice job. If you don't want the color to be dark, it can do a good job with that. So the first part of your assignment is to make a tint, a shade, a tone sample. And then in the rest of your space on this page, I want you to draw anything you want and color it in with color pencils. But in your coloring, I want you to try and use a tint, a shade, and a tone. They can all be different or they can all be the same. You decide anything, any shape, any object, your name. But when you color it, I want you to burnish and create a tint, a shade, and a tone. Okay? Have fun.